The Vice Chair calls Terry Russell, representing the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill of Ohio. Thank you, Terry.
Madam Co-Chair. And this special committee, I just can't tell you how pleased I am. My presentation is going to be a little different. I'm a little scared because my colleagues are behind me. I'm going to be a little critical of some of the system and beg you, for once and for all to do something for the people I represent. My name is Terry Russell, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Ohio, often referred to as NAMI Ohio. We are proud that we are the largest grassroots mental health advocacy organization in the country. Here in Ohio, we represent over 500,000 citizens whose lives have been invaded by mental illness. This includes those living with mental illness and their families. NAMI Ohio has 40 affiliates throughout Ohio, representing all 88 counties. Each of you have constituents in your community that deal every day with their mental illness or a mental illness in their family. These families are desperately asking for your help. We've never asked for it more than we are today. You've just heard from my colleagues that those living with mental illness and their families rely on the Ohio's mental health system to provide the care that is desperately needed for our loved ones. Although we are often critical of the system, we are never critical of the people. Sherry's boards and Teresa's agencies are our heroes. But that doesn't mean that we're getting the services that we need. Make no mistake, families living with mental illness in their homes provide 80% of caregiving. They have not been served with the same urgency of those in other health care issues. My job at NAMI is to educate anybody who will listen to me on this mean illness. We'll educate you, educate you, educate you. We advocate, which like we are today, on fixing a system that for years has allowed our family members to wander the countryside. One of the most important roles that we provide at NAMI is to support thousands of citizens who need mental health care and have no idea how to enter this system. When you're a student at Ohio State at 19 and develop schizophrenia and you call your mom and you're delusional, the mom has no idea what an ADMH board is or what a community mental health center is. They need somebody, and we get thousands and thousands of calls just to direct people. And the one that breaks your heart is when the mother says, "What do I do when they tell me my son has schizophrenia?" And I says, "It changed your life forever." It's a hard thing to say. Many of you are new to the legislature, I saw on the list, and I'm asking you today, while you're here, please prioritize mental health. It's been neglected for too long. In 1988, this body passed a historic Mental Health Act. I was part of that group that put that good policy together. We closed 6 of the 12 state hospitals. We had already closed 3 children's hospitals. There's none. We had 27,000 people in the state hospitals in 1957. Today we have 600. One of the reasons that policy was good, we were promised a community support system that would help those who were in the hospital warehouse for years and all of those that would have gone into the hospital for years. After 32 years, that promise has never been kept. Many of these special citizens find themselves in prisons, in jails. They're homeless, living under bridges, in unsafe housing. Not because they're bad people, but because they have an illness that nobody wants to have an illness. I've never had anybody come to me and say, "I would like to be mentally ill." Never. This special population is disabled because of their mental illness. Some are disabled because of their mental illness, and unlike other disability groups, they do not have the resources to support the needs of living a productive life. They just don't have it. We would never let people in the developmental disabled system or the aging system or other systems be treated so poorly. The time has come to recognize that serious persistent mental illness, we call it SPMI, is oftentimes disabling to the individual, and the need to address quality of life of these individuals currently in the system and in the future. It has become a norm. 15 years ago, I talked to, by the way, I'm entering my 49th year in the mental health field, so it's been a long time here. I told my colleagues today, I think this is my 300th time to come and talk to this group. But 15 years ago, I remember a senator looking at me and saying, Terry, what are we going to do about the homeless people that are mentally ill? What are you going to do? And I asked them to do things. They're still there. They're still under bridges. They're full. This pandemic has been terrible on this. But we accept it. It's become a norm. It's okay to be in prison if you're mentally ill. It's okay to be in jail. It's okay. No, it isn't. And what's really why I'm here and pretty emotional about this isn't new. In 1978, President Carter put a commission together for mental illness. In 2001, the state of Ohio had a commission. And in 2002, Mike Hogan, the director of the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, was asked by the president to be the chair of the President's Mental Health Commission in 2002. And the outcome of those commissions were all the same. I'm going to read 3 of them. This isn't me talking. This is 3 commissions back as late, the latest is 2002. People working in the system truly care about the individuals they serve. Yet the system is fragmented, in disarray, from underlying structural, financing, and organizational problems. Second, the reality is that mental health system looks more like a maze than a coordinating system of care. And finally, the one that really shows that nothing's happened, the study finds a shocking 90% of unemployment rates among adults with serious mental illness. 90% do not work. The worst level of unemployment of any group with a disability. Number 1. And today we still have 90% of the people with these disabilities not working. If NAMI Ohio could have a magic wand and come to you today with one recommendation, we would develop an individual plan of care for every adult with a serious mental illness and every child with a serious emotional disturbance. Medicaid has come out with the RISE program, Ohio RISE, for the 50,000 kids in multi-services with the juvenile courts and with family services. And they're going to have a special plan, one plan for those 50,000 kids who have been sent out of state, who have made their parents lose custody. We need to do the same thing for the adult population that are severely mentally disabled. The goal encompasses not as simply address, what the system does sometimes is we address the clinical issues and manage symptoms. But we need to enable people to cope successfully with the life challenges and build resiliency and to promote community living. The new focus for services for those with severe mental illness goes beyond the typical community mental health center treatment. It will save lives by increasing access to community support programs. Me complaining today does not solve the problem. We must look at every individual who is disabled due to their mental illness and develop a plan that provides them with what they need, not what is available. Listen to that. What is needed, not what a 60-year-old system provides necessarily. For too many years, we have focused on mental health system, on the system, and not the individual, not the families that I represent, the heartbreak that I see every day because of this terrible illness. You know, at NAMI Ohio, there's a saying, we use this saying all the time, you can't get better if you don't have a roof over your head, food in your belly, and somebody who knows your name. We have as many as 50,000 severely, persistently, mentally ill, disabled individuals that do not have a roof over their head, do not know where they're going to eat next, and they certainly don't have many friends. Can you imagine any of us? What would we do? We can go into a community mental health center and get all the counseling and get all the medication and get all the great services they offer. But if you open that door, you don't know where you're going to eat that day, or you know where you're going to sleep that day, we've got to do something about that. I will say, though, that medication and counseling, what our mental health system does for the vast majority of those with mental illness that aren't disabled, is absolutely a miracle. God bless everybody working in that system, providing that care to that 80 to 85% of those that have a mental illness that can function in the community. It's that group that can't, that's costing this body, everybody, more money than it needs to. I have a list of programs real quick. Personal-centered care, I've talked about that, coordination. Detailed planning for daily living opportunities, out of reach for so many. We have a model in the DD system. They do a tremendous job. They see a client, John Smith. It's not a client, it's a name. They see that person, they put a plan together, then they say, what do you need? And they provide that. And their numbers are about the same as ours for that disabling population. We need housing for basic services, food, shelter, clothing. Adequate inpatient care. We have all these new psychiatric hospitals that popped up, and God bless them, it's a place to send somebody, but they stay there 4 or 5 days. And then they're released with no plan or back to where they came from. 30% are released to the street. We have wasted all the money that was spent for those 5 days in that hospital the day that a person is put on the street. Right. It's just a waste of money. If we took that expensive money, the day in a hospital, $1,000, let's say, and they're there 5 days. You know what I could do for $5,000? I told the director the other day, I'll get a Holiday Inn room and we'll put 5 people in a Holiday room for a year. We couldn't put it for that many, but we'd do something. We've also come up with programs. We were so frustrated with people being let out of the hospital too early and not happening. We helped the 18 ADMH boards in Southeast Ohio develop the Adam Amanda Mental Health Rehabilitation Center. By the way, Adam and Amanda, 2 young people in their 20s, both lost their lives to suicide because they were released from the hospital with nowhere to go. That's been a miracle. The recidivism rate at the state hospital in Athens was 44% recidivism in 90 days. It's now less than 10. The day they go into the rehab center, I'm going to tell you it's a little off color, it's not, but they go in up to 45 days. My father had a stroke, and he was in the hospital 4 days. If they would have treated him like we treat the mentally ill, he'd have gone out on the street and fallen down because he couldn't walk. So what did they do? They put him in a rehab center, taught him to walk. He went home and had a quality of life. We let the people out, nothing. So we're going to do rehabilitation centers all over the state. And by the way, Lucas County, yesterday we met with Representative Capture in Congress, and we're going to get money to open that within the year. We need group homes. I've been a big proponent of group homes because I think they're families, 5 people living together. At least they have somebody who knows their name in the morning. But how they were started were with people trying in either faith-based or trying to get out of poverty, and because of not in my neighborhood, they're all in distressed areas, all of them. And they were out of the shadows until recently. Lori Chris has been a champion for these homes. But before that, they were given nothing to treat these very severely mentally disabled people. We need to make sure these are quality homes because there's 790 of them in Ohio. We need supportive housing and independent living. We can't even get vouchers from HUD for our people. Can't even get vouchers. And we need to have more than just independent living and supportive housing. We don't want people to go into an independent living and watch TV and smoke cigarettes with a mental illness. You know, get a little quiet behind me. I'm a little sad. I'm getting too emotional. I'll slow down here. We need crisis services. And again, the Department of Mental Health, Lori, Chris, and Teresa, and Sherry, all of them have helped with this crisis program development. COVID, it stopped. Now it's starting up again. But we need immediate access to services if someone's in crisis. You know what that is today? You call 911. And the police go out to the house. And you know that that's not the best way. Now, we've trained more police officers in this state than any other in crisis intervention on how to de-escalate situations. But they only have 2 options when they get there. They send them to jail or they go to an emergency room that have no idea what to do with a person with a mental illness. We need 24-hour, 7-day care in an emergency room just to cover mental illness. This is the true statement. In the last year, I've had no less than 10 calls where people have sat in the emergency room for up to 3 days. Sat there because they didn't know what to do with them. We need ACT teams, which is assertive community treatment, which takes the professionals out to get services. And we need crisis centers. The thing around this country, we're finding out, crisis centers in special areas where the police, when they do get called, they have a place to take them. If the family is in crisis, they have a place to take them, and it's mental health care. And they get their care. And that's going to happen. You're going to see, that's not my direction, that's Lori's direction at the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. And finally, and somebody mentioned here earlier, suicide today, it's alarming. I have a board of 27 members, all family members or those living with the illness. I've lost, in the last 10 years, I've lost 10 family members to suicide. And these are people that are involved. These are the people that are trying to get services. In closing, just before COVID's pandemic started, I took 3 family members to the governor's residence. And they made a presentation, and surprisingly, he had the full cabinet there, all of them. A week before this meeting, a young lady in Upper Arlington here in Columbus, who suffered from untreated mental illness for years, shot and killed her father and wounded her mother. This mother and father were friends of mine. This father and mother taught the family-to-family course that NAMI, Ohio, does the training. They were friends, and they called me. Now, what do you do when you go to Upper Arlington the day after that happened? The sister of the gentleman that was shot said, anything I can do, Terry. And I says, how about going next week with me to the governor's house? And she says, I'll go. During that meeting with the governor, the sister of the father who was killed told the governor and his cabinet how the system has failed his family. I also had an African-American, what we call the fire-breathing mothers of NAMI. They're great. And she said to the governor, I have a kit in my back of my car with a blanket and a bottle of water and a pillow. And I go to the Steak and Shake because the parking lot is lit, and I sleep there because I'm afraid to sleep at home because my loved one may hurt me. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. And I have been around a long time. I'm the old timer in the mental health system. I've never heard a governor look at these people and say, we're going to fix this. I can't say enough what that meant to me, the people in that room, those 3 family members, and then when I let everybody else know. The governor and the budget that he's presented to you is a great first step in keeping the promise. I believe that budget was put together because of that meeting. Now, I don't know that. He'll probably be mad at me if he heard me say that I think how he did his budget. But the budget talks about the chronic population. There's funding there and their needs. There's talk about housing and crisis and funding there. There's talk about dealing with mentally ill in the jails. Do you believe we have so many, 30, 40% of the people in the jails are mentally ill, and some of them don't provide, they take them off their medication. This new budget has money for medication, long-term injectables. And there's money in there for successful reintegration for those mentally ill coming out of our prisons, and they will come out. They'll probably go back in if we don't do something that's so much less expensive to help them reintegrate into the community. Although this budget's the first step, I ask you, be an advocate for mental illness. God bless you for what you do, and thank you for letting me present today.
Thank you so much, Terry, for your presentation. It's very compelling. Well said. Representative Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And let's turn this on. But thank you for coming out today. Very much appreciate it. I know you spoke a lot about the criminal justice system within this, and that's something near and dear to my heart. I've worked on a lot of policy in that space. And then I just wanted to make sure I had it in the right order, so I checked my phone, and it is Rehabilitation First, Department of Rehabilitation and Correction. And What kind of gap do you see on the rehabilitation side, and how far short do you think we're falling on actually rehabbing the people in our criminal justice?
Madam Co-Chairman, Representative, it's kind of interesting. I made this, not this, but another presentation in front of 200 people, and the Director of Rehabilitation Corrections was on the line, and then she spoke next. And she says, you should have seen me. I was giving Terry I was cheering because we are treating your people. There's 9,000 severely mentally disabled in our prisons. 4,500 are severely mentally disabled, the ones I'm talking about. 4,500 that are isolated. Their illness, their delusions is that they're in a box. And what do you know? They're in a box. We need to address that and find out. We don't, by the way, we don't say if a mentally ill person does something illegal, they have to pay the consequences. We don't use that as an excuse. But we do say if it's not something that they need to be incarcerated for, but could function in the community by getting treatment and become productive citizens. And by the way, recovery works. Teresa's agencies, they have better outcomes than any other illness. For depression and bipolar illness, better outcomes. So, I lost my, the prisons. I apologize. I've been in this business a long time, 22 years at NAMI. I was an ADMH board director for 22 years before that. When we did the Mental Health Act of '88, we just changed institutions. We brought the criminal justice in, be the quasi-mental health system. That's unfair, and it's not only unfair to the sheriffs and the community, it's so unfair to the people I represent. That wasn't the intent. Good people, I was on it. It was called Common Concerns that came up with that bill. But the implementation, and that's where I'm worried right now. The governor's made good in this budget. I'm tickled to death. But what's the implementation going to be? I have all the faith in Lori Chris. I really do. But I'm going to need you to monitor and make sure that it happens the right way for this population.
Thank you. Representative West, follow-up?
I just want to make a comment. I just want to say that the state is falling incredibly short on the rehabilitation side. And I really commend our corrections officers because there is a place for corrections and they do a great job, but we are falling short on rehabilitation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Representative West.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Interestingly enough, the people behind you, they always say iron sharpens iron. And that's what I love about NAMI, because you are a strong advocate for all people with mental illness, and more specifically those people that are experiencing chronically mentally ill and needing services, right? You had mentioned about how we're kind of going backward, well, we almost need to go backwards in order to get the services that we once had. In '88, when they, again, brought forward and closed these psychiatric institutions and put individuals in their own homes in the community, at that point in time, they put those community supports, they put the feet to the street and helped those individuals, but then they stopped. And then now you're starting to see these individuals, at that point they were living in homes and providing or restructuring their lives from being institutionalized, right? And then those services went away. And it was almost like case managers were still there, but it wasn't as intense. And then next thing you see them, they're on the corner asking for change or walking through the streets, talking to themselves and things of that nature, and which is still going on today. How do we go back to that, and what can we do to correct that, correct the supports necessary for them?
Madam Vice Chair, Representative, let me say, what I'm talking about is change. You know, Robert Kennedy said, progress is a nice word, but change is its motivation, and change has its enemies. We have to fight it. We need to change the system and not deal with all the fighting about change. Everybody in this room knows what I'm saying was in report after report after report. So how do we change it? And I think it's those services I'm talking about. We need to be talking about housing. Yes, it's expensive sometimes, But it certainly isn't expensive as an inpatient psychiatric bill. You know, Mike Hogan, I only had a big argument with, well, I had a lot of arguments with Mike Hogan, but one big one. He gave $50 million back to the General Revenue Fund when he closed the 6 hospitals. Gave $50 million back that could have been used for housing and for clubhouses and for crisis services. How do you make that up? I don't know how I know how you're competitive and all you new representatives. You're going to have 600 people come and ask you for money. You're going to have 600. Please keep mental health as your number one priority.
Follow up.
I know everybody's going to tell you that.
Follow-up, Representative West?
Yes, and I believe Rep. Ferguson, thank you for bringing that up in reference to rehabilitation centers. Because as we look at putting individuals in jail, there's a cost associated with that, and that bill is not being paid by Medicaid. That's being paid by the state, correct?
Right.
So we have the medication and the mental illness and the services that are being rendered in the Rehabilitation Correction Center is getting paid by the state, and then the services necessary for that person to be there is being paid by the state. Wouldn't it be cheaper for that individual to be out in their own home, in their community?
Absolutely. Madam Vice Chairman, Representative West, absolutely. And we do get Medicaid for our mental health rehabilitation centers that are privately operated by a community mental health center for the services they provide to those clients within that center. So it has cut the cost tremendously.
It's cut some, yeah.
And the other thing is, why pay $800-900 a day in a hospital when a rehabilitation is $143? There's savings there, but everything is savings doesn't help you with your budget balancing. I understand that. I've been around long enough.
And just one last follow-up, I guess, with that being said. The cost that someone has in the rehabilitation center is not being shared by the federal government, correct? That's state funds.
Right. For what you're talking about, yes.
So then those individuals out in the community, we would be saving those dollars, and it would be more of a shared expense from the federal government and the state government if they were in the community versus in prison or in a psychiatric institution.
Absolutely. The ADMH board in Athens and the 18 counties in that area are spending $400,000 on the rehabilitation center, which cost about $1 million to operate. They're getting $600,000 from federal and other funds to fund the services there. We don't get any of that if it's a state hospital or prison. We don't get any. The state pays everything. So absolutely. And by the way, on the social work, I have to say one thing to Representative West. You made about one of my proudest moments when I was put into the Ohio State University Hall of Fame for social work last year. I'm in their Hall of Fame after all these years.
Well, with no further questions. Oh, you do. Representative Click.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Russell. Appreciate your passion. I think everyone on this committee is probably here because they're passionate about the same thing. I tend to be a very transparent person, so I'll just share with you that my passions are very deep here. And I don't know if I can do this or not.
Representative, you're what I call a NAMI daddy, and I deal with it every day. The tears are good because someone's listening.
My dad suffered from addictions. I had to personally restrain my father from taking his life. My dad was homeless before he died. So all these things hit me very personally. And that's one reason why I'm here. And there's others in my family who've had the same issues. Just a couple questions. You mentioned individual care program. Who has custody of that, and how does that work? Because many people who need that are going to be transient. They're not in one place. They move from city to city, and sometimes even from state to state. How do we make that effective?
Co-chair, and I'm sorry, Madam Co-chair, Representative, we need to have extreme criteria, just like DD does, for their chronic population. You go through a rigorous review to be put onto that list. But when you're on that list, you're going to get the services you need to survive. So if they're transient, when we identify, by the way, they come into our system one way or the other, either out of the jails, out of prisons. The police bring them to us. When we get them, we can then look and see what the needs are. And if that means probate, if that means guardianship, it means other guardianship programs, those things have to be developed. Because, and some people in the mental health community don't like me to say this, but I think we have a responsibility that if an individual is not making decisions, it's the illness making decisions, to step in. If someone in front of my office got hit by a car and broke their leg, I'd call the ambulance. We don't do that for the mentally ill. But we know they need help. We need to find a way of getting all people served.
Hello?
Follow-up?
So, and this may be a deeper question for another time, but it follows a little bit on what you're saying. But I know there are many people who want resources, but there are many people who do not want the resources that are even offered today. How do you address that?
The biggest problem we have in the mental health system is noncompliance with medication, with treatment. They feel they're okay. I don't have an illness. All of those kinds of things. But we do, we're sophisticated enough to know when we can step in and when we can't. And the laws are already there. Problem is, many times we don't use those laws because we have no place to put them if we did determine that they needed the service, even if they don't believe they do. I would love to have more, we will have more conversations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you all for coming and presenting to all of us. Again, please feel free to reach out to these people and to these groups. With no further business, the committee is adjourned.